And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 54. Going to talk some player debates, I guess, for the two early mocks, ADPs by position. Go over a handful of those. There's going to be much more that could be discussed, and we probably will because we'll need stuff to talk about throughout the offseason before we do player previews, which probably isn't that far around the corner. You can find me on Twitter at BDintric and the BatFlip portion of the show on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, man?
We are doing we're doing well, Bubba. We're right at the end of the line here in the NLCS. So just monitoring that while we rock the pod, and as always, we continue to show up throughout the off season regardless of what is happening. So
yep. Yeah, we'll be here. The majority of the time we'll be here once a week. If something comes up, we might take a week off here or there just to kind of get things done. But we'll be here once a week. Like I said, position previews will start in another few weeks. Like I think December. So it's not that far away. It's like 5 episodes away. We'll be doing position previews. So not that far away. Yeah, the two early mocks has been a good way to kind of get our head twisted towards 2021 a little bit. And then we'll kind of dig in deeper and look at some more stuff as we get more information, more storylines, stuff along those lines to talk about, which usually come out once the postseason's done. You start hearing some more stuff. So we got about one more week of baseball, the World Series. I think if it goes 7 games, it'll be a week from Tuesday, I think would be game 7. We've got about 10 more days of baseball potentially. That's what we look forward to. So we'll see.
It's amazing. I mean, just to think too, like, Draft Champions leagues through NFBC will start right after the World Series concludes, and it's been a really fun postseason. I mean, it's just been a really, really enjoyable outside of like MLB scheduling, which just continues to
the worst
confuse me. Why they're putting certain games where like we want to be able to watch the games. And then like mixing some in the morning and then some in the evening. It's like, oh, if you're a Braves fan, you have to be up till like 1 o'clock in the morning, to watch the games. But outside of that, it's been a real treat, and congrats to the Rays fans. Our buddy Yancey Eaton. I know there's others like Jason Collette and Mike Warner over at FWFB who are definitely big Rays supporters. So kudos to them. That was a really exciting series, and the Rays. There's all these narratives, but the Rays play good baseball. They've got an elite bullpen. They've got elite starters as well, which I think oftentimes goes under the radar. And everybody contributes in their own way. And I think that there's something special about a team that, is kind of better better than the sum of its parts or something like that. Yeah, is that how the saying goes?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay, cool.
And they got the man, the myth, the legend, Randy Arozarena. So that's always pretty good. So that doesn't hurt. But for all the Dodger fans, if you guys do advance, which you are 3 outs away from potentially doing it as we record.
We don't want to jinx you. We don't want to jinx it, Bubba.
Well,
of course not.
Bobby Nightingale was so nice that the second Bellinger's ball went out of the park, tweeted out that the Dodgers are 6 out away from the World Series. It was like, thanks, Bob. Like no one would have figured that out without you. Really appreciate your hard work and dedication to the craft. But I just want to let people know that get annoyed with me not liking the Dodgers. I picked the Rays to win before the season, and I picked them before the playoffs to win. So if you tell me I'm just bandwagoning the Rays now, you're false on that one. Maybe the Braves, maybe these other teams, but the Rays, no. I've wanted the Rays to win this whole time. So I will stick through that one thin and thick. But let's talk player debates. Let's have some fun with this. And we'll start and we're still in our mock draft. I believe I made like my 27th round pick. I think I have 4 more picks to go. We just started that round. So I got 4 more picks to go, all reserve picks. So we're pretty much wrapping things up, but we'll do a couple different positions here, mainly offensive. I didn't do any pitching yet because that could be like a whole nother show. You could do a ton of different debates on that, so maybe we'll do that one next week.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, because I was started on the pitchers, like, that's a lot of things we could do there. So did a couple from each position for the most part, and we'll start with first base here. We got Abreu, Voit, and Alonso. And right now, if you go by ADP, Abreu's at 37, Voit 46, Alonso 52, but they're the 4th, 5th, and 6th first baseman off the board. And the reason I like to pick them because A, they're next to each other. B, 15-team leagues. It's like, okay, early 3rd round, early 4th round, in the 5th round. Like these are one of the guys you're going to take unless you just kind of keep waiting for the Olsons, Goldschmidts, others of the world. Another debate we have coming up after this for farther back. But when you look at these 3, you got Abreu, the veteran, who's always consistent, but always like the 11th or 12th first baseman off the board. had a monster year, gets quite the boost. You got Voit, who was like the 20th first baseman off the board, maybe 17th, 18th, had a just monster year, but health's always a concern. Then you had Pete Alonso, who everyone's in love with, but he fell back because regression was due for Pete. Still hits the snot out of the baseball, but there was some regression that you kind of think. I think we saw exactly who Pete Alonso was. A mediocre average, still tons of power. So when you look at these three guys, Toby, and I know you might not even want to draft any of them, but if you had to, how would you go about picking which of these three you take?
Wow, Bubba, you know me so well.
I know, right. When I put this whole list together, I'm like, Toby wouldn't draft like 80% of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, Abreu, obviously, I mean, he's very good. I think for me, he's kind of head and shoulders above these other guys. And the reason I say that, I think, is a couple things. I think the skills are consistent. Like, he's done this for a very long time. He's been very good every single year. And, obviously he's not going to be able to replicate, like, we're not going to get this times 3, next year from him, but the skills are just super consistent, makes really quality contact, makes a lot of contact, relatively low strikeout rate for a guy who hits for his amount of power. And I think the major change that's taken place is the guys around him, right? So more guys behind him to drive him in, like Eloy Jimenez is not a bad guy to have right behind you. And then they've got some real studs in front of him too, and some really good OBP guys. I mean, Tim Anderson is not known as an OBP guy, and we'll talk about him a little bit later, but his batting average is so high consistently that he actually is a decent OBP guy. And then you have Yohan Moncada as the number 2 or Yasmani Grandal as the number 2, and both of those guys are solid OBP dudes. So I think, I just think that the situation is great, and I think the kind of sum of all parts, I'm using that again, God. The sum of what he provides, like, the skills are just very consistent, very good. Everything, he checks every box except for plate discipline. So if you're in an OBP league, maybe not, but if you're in a 5x5, if your league uses average, I think he's awesome. He's awesome to have. After that, I think, it may be a little bit of a surprise, but I'd probably go with Pete Alonso, I think. I think a good example, like, Luke Voit, kind of everything, in a lot of ways, everything worked out for him, right? 34.9% home run per fly ball. The BABIP actually was lower than his season total. So maybe there's a little bit more there in the batting average, but I just think, like, Alonso underperformed, like, in terms of, maybe expectations of what he was going to do, but he still provided a really solid line. He actually lowered his strikeout rate this past year, although the contact rate was somewhat down. But I just think, like, if you were going to go into a season and you were going to say, okay, who is more likely to hit 45 home runs this season, Luke Voit or Pete Alonso, I'd have to go with Alonso. Voit maybe a little bit a little bit better in terms of his batting average and what you might expect in that perspective. But, I think I trust Pete Alonso a little bit more than Luke Voit. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there, but so I'd probably go with Alonso just because I think, we haven't seen the injury stuff that we've seen from Voit, out of Alonso. So that's not really a concern. And I just think from a consistency standpoint, I think going into this season, if you were like, okay, who's more likely to hit 250 with 45 bombs, 100 RBIs, and 80 runs or something like that, I'd probably go with Alonso over Voit. But again, I think it's a pretty close call there. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I can't argue that. It's because I'm never an Alonso fan, but I don't disagree with the sentiments there. I go with Abreu out of the 3. Always a big Abreu fan. The consistency is huge for me. The batting average that he brings to the table, which these other guys don't really bring to the table we're talking about. And still, like, that lineup around him, you said, is just tremendous. It's going to get better. They're so young. That offense is going to be very, very good with the White Sox. So I like Abreu a lot. The overall hit tool is just phenomenal. So I have no qualms about him there. It's just the price tag is crazy this year. I'd like to see where that actually ends up in March. You imagine it's going to drop a bit, but I don't know. That's a steep price tag. So yeah, it really comes down to like Voit versus Alonso for like who would you take second. And Alonso's a guy I was very, very down on coming into this year, at least for his price. So now the new price is a little more reasonable. I'll be 100% honest there. But it's weird when you look at his overall StatCast page because like his barrel rate dropped 3%, his sweet spot percentage dropped 7%. But everything else, like the strikeout rate dropped 1%, the hard hit 1%, like minor drops there. Almost everything else stayed in line with what he did. His batting average actually obviously dropped a big amount. When you look at his BABIP, it went from 280 to 242. 280 was his career low. He never hit below 284 in the minors. Before that was 314 or higher. So career low BABIP last year, which resulted in a much lower batting average. So that's something to keep in mind that maybe it's just a slight tweak. And when you look at his types of contact, ground ball rate was similar, fly ball rate was similar, but his pop-up rate jumped 3%. Like his fly ball rate dropped 1%. So he's popping up the ball more, not barreling as much. Obviously, when you're popping it up more, less of a chance for a good BABIP. It might just be a small tweak for him, which is crazy to think about. He was going opposite field a lot more this last year, which was something, I don't know if it was something he's trying to do or maybe just result in being uncomfortable at the plate, trying something new, things we don't know about. But if he's just a small tweak away to getting back to 2019 and now you get him in the 5th round, that's pretty intriguing. So he's going to be a guy I look into much more going into this year if that's the price point we look at. Luke Voit, I'm a big fan of, but a couple things is, A, his health's always a concern. B, the Yankees have a lot of moving parts. If he struggles, they'll put someone else at first base. Like, I know as much as they love him and the power's awesome, they'll move him around if they have to. So I like Voit a lot. I don't like him in the 4th round. So I go Abreu, Alonso, and Voit with you as well. I'm pretty much on the similar thought process there.
Just on Voit, and I mean, this holds some weight, but he is in Yankee Stadium and he likes to go to right field. But he had 21 barrels last year, so he had fewer barrels than he had home runs.
His StatCast rate dropped a lot on like everything. His hard hit rate, all of it was down from last year.
Yeah. So again, I think it's just important to think about regression, and even within StatCast metrics, that happens. So yeah, that's a tough one though.
All right, the other first baseman one we had here was if you kind of miss out on the first run, don't like a couple guys in the middle, you drop down, you're looking for some savings. You got Eric Hosmer at pick 148, Josh Bell at 153, and Rhys Hoskins at 168. So about a round apart for a couple of them. Hosmer and Bell 5 picks apart, but then you go about a round to get to Hoskins, who only a couple years removed from being a stud. Hosmer's, changed his launch angle, all that good stuff, so that's been impressive. And then what do you do with Josh Bell? That's just a question that everyone has right now. So what are you looking at with these 3 guys?
Yeah, it's a little bit of this is just an area where I'm like not going to be in on it. Probably any of these guys. I mean, Hosmer certainly made some changes, but it's still very hard to know whether those changes are just small sample size or not. Yes, the ground ball rate went down. It's still well above league average. And so there's just pieces there. He stole 4 bases. Like, is that something that he's going to do on a consistent basis or not? But I think the one thing that I do like is that he is a compiler. Congratulations, Dodgers.
Yep.
On to the World Series. Congratulations, guys. Go Rays. Bubba quickly chimes in there. So I think with Hosmer, I think the key thing though is that he's in the middle of that really good lineup, and so he's going to be kind of a compiler. He always has been. I mean, this is around where he was going in 2019 drafts, I think. Before he had a really bad 2019, and so he'd probably be the guy that I would look at here liking the most. Josh Bell is just so hard because, generally speaking, you don't want to pay too much attention to small sample sizes. But, that's one of the reasons why you have to say, like, okay, he's been super good. He was super good for half a season last year, right? And then he was bad in the second. He wasn't as good in the second half, and he's continued that fall. There's certainly a drop in contact rate, right? 69%. So essentially a 7% drop in his overall contact rate, which is not good. Again, could be a small sample size, but then you also see his ground ball rate going up a lot, K rate way up as well. So there's just a lot to just raise enough, red flags or yellow flags or whatever you want to say about them. I think there's enough of those to really just not want to take that risk. I think there's a lot of other guys that you'd want to take in this spot. Hoskins is obviously interesting, but my understanding is with the Tommy John surgery that he's going under, he's probably not going to be ready for early in the season, or else I think there are some concerns about whether he's going to be available for the beginning of the season. If I were to have all these guys healthy, I think Hoskins would definitely be the first guy on that list. I just think, he struggled a lot, and he's bound to do this because of just his batted ball profile. But he struggled early on in the season, but he was just tearing the cover off the ball for a couple weeks there. And I don't have it in front of me, but I feel like he actually, and this is one of the things that I do like about Hoskins and this type of player is, even though they are a major concern in terms of the batting average that they provide, because the OBP is so strong, even when they're struggling, they tend to at least generate some runs for you. And so, again, in less than 200 plate appearances, he ended up hitting 10 home runs, 35 runs. So he's pretty much the same guy that he's been, with a slightly better batting average. I think this is much more who he is versus the 226 Rhys Hoskins. And so of all the guys who are there, I would probably take him if they were all healthy, but I'd order them Hosmer, Hoskins, and Bell probably at this juncture, without having that clear idea of what Hoskins' health is going to be like.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on Hoskins, because the initial thing was Tommy John surgery, and a couple days after that I saw it was a different type of surgery. It's only about 4 to 6 months. So if that's what it is, he could technically be ready for spring training. That'll be where it'll be interesting to see what it was. Because I heard he didn't need a second opinion, doesn't need Tommy John surgery, just needs some other surgery for his, I believe, elbow, but might be shoulder. So something to keep in mind. We'll have to keep an eye on all that. But I love Hoskins. I've been a big Hoskins fan last year. Played well for the most part, like you said. Just the batting average hasn't quite been there, but OBP on a team like the Phillies that are scoring a lot of runs is a big thing to enjoy. So I like Hoskins a lot. If he's healthy, that's a big move. But Hosmer is a guy I like a ton. I loved him last year. Obviously, the price tag has changed immensely. Missed a lot of time, so he wasn't quite the same when he came back from injury. So we'll have to see how sustainable it is after the offseason going into the next season. But we've seen guys make the changes like this for the launch angle. We've seen the Daniel Murphys, the Justin Turners, a bunch of these guys that have done it throughout the days to become more power hitters, because you don't just change a launch angle of like a negative launch angle to an 8-degree launch angle overnight. You have to actually work hard at that. He did that. So we'll see where that lines. But, there was other things to like about what Hosmer is. He lowered his strikeout rate 7%, give or take. Like the walk rate stayed the same, hard hit rate stayed the same, but barrel rate went up, launch angle went up, things you like to see, their sweet spot percentage went up. All things that point to more power and more production at the plate, which we saw this season. Is it sustainable? Again, we don't know. I would like to think it is. I'd like to think that it's like if you took some risks early in your draft and you need a first baseman, it's a steep price tag, but Hosmer's one of those guys you can trust to kind of get you like a 280 to 285 average, get you 20-ish home runs, maybe more if this sticks up. The runs, RBIs, maybe 80, give or take, and maybe throw in a couple steals, but don't really count on those. But he's going to get you a steady stat line in a roto league that gets you a long ways. I always loved him as a corner infield option late, not so much first baseman, but I pick 150. He's probably going to be your first baseman. That's just the way you're going to have to look at it there. So I would go Hoskins first if healthy, Hosmer, Bell with you. Because Bell, I don't know where he is. They talked about DFAing him at times. It's a whole mess there in Pittsburgh, and then the supporting cast around him is a disaster. So I think he needs to change the scenery. He needs someone else to work with him and get him back, get his head right or something, because he just doesn't look the same since that first half he had a couple years ago. It's been a mess. So Bell would be the third for me. I was actually surprised he's going this high at this point in time, because he's the 14th first baseman off the board, and last year I want to say he was 10th or 11th in March. So in theory, maybe he's dropping some picks, but as the overall first baseman hasn't changed much, which really surprised me when you look at it all. Because like Carlos Santana's going away after him, Christian Walker, Trey Mancini, who's supposed to be healthy. A lot of guys are going after him that I'd probably take over Josh Bell. So that's where I sit at the first base position. All right, let's head to second base now. And this one's one I really enjoy because It's got a player I have no business liking, and then a couple other different ways to analyze here. You got Gleyber Torres at pick 64, Kevin Biggio at 67, Keston Hiura at 70. So about a 6-pick range for 3 second basemen going off the board. And they kind of offer differences. Torres and Hiura are kind of similar, I guess. Not hitting for great average, still have some power, question marks there. Biggio more OBP, but still a heck of an all-around ball player and steals some bags. I want to know where you stand on these three, Toby.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tough one because I don't know if I'm into any of them really. I think they all, I'm probably, if I were to say, I'd probably like Gleyber the most. I think his price this year was just way too high for me. He had kind of the Yankee tax on him, I think, but he actually made some improvements at the plate this year. And, he started off really poorly, but, look at what he did in the postseason, right? He was absolutely on fire. And again, we don't want to put too much stock into the postseason, but when we have such a small sample size to work with in the season and he was injured, it's hard. But it looks like he's actually made some potential gains in the plate discipline department, which would be, I think, big for him because that's never been kind of his go-to. In the Yankees lineup, he's going to hit at the top of that lineup when he's healthy. And I think he'll just accrue a lot. Biggio is just he's kind of the same guy he was before. I think the batting average ticked up, but when you look at his expected BA, it's still 215. It was 215 this year. So when you look at, the combination of his 2 seasons, you're looking at a 232 expected batting average. His barrel rate was actually down considerably this year, almost cut in half to 5%. Again, small sample size, but my concerns heading into this season around Biggio was the fact that his exit velo is just really low. Like he does not hit the ball very hard, so he needs to really pull the ball down the line, which he's capable of doing a lot. So OBP, very valuable, but I think especially around pick 60, the batting average is just too low for me to go after a guy like that when I think there's going to be a lot of other home run and stolen base combination guys that are similar to him who I think I'm going to like a lot more. The position flexibility is really nice, I think, but not a guy I'm going to be targeting. And I think the same with Hiura. The K issues are just massive. And that was true last year, but he had a BABIP around 400, and this year he had a lower BABIP. He's probably somewhere in between because he does make pretty decent contact, but he really struggles. Jeff Zimmerman had an article just about how he really struggled against the fastball. It wasn't even breaking pitches. It was like in the zone against fastballs, he had the lowest contact rate. And that's worrisome. And that's not something that he's shown any progress on, right, throughout his career, which I think is a big red flag that early in the draft. So for me, I'm generally staying away from all three probably, but I do think that there's an opportunity for Gleyber to be really good here.
Yeah, Gleyber's a tough one because I didn't like his price tag at all last year. I was against him, similar to Pete Alonso. Wanted nothing to do with any of that. But you look at what Gleyber did this year at the plate, and I think we talked about it on a previous episode. And similar to Javi Baez, is he shored up his plate discipline because his walk rate rose from 8% to almost 14%. His strikeout rate went from 21.5 to 17.5. Those are great things from a young hitter. That's what you want to see. But his barrel rate dropped to 3.7%. His sweet spots percentage dropped. His hard hit rate actually went up. So there's a lot of weird ups and downs when you look at things. And you go and look even deeper, his ground ball rate rose 4%, while his fly ball rate was about 0.5% less. Line drive rate actually went up. His pop-up rate dropped almost 5%. So his pop-ups basically turned into ground balls. So instead of getting way under the ball, he's getting on top of the baseball. And then the big kicker for me is you don't want your hitters chasing out of the zone. I get it. But he dropped his chase rate from 31% to 20%. His chase contacts was the same, but it just shows he wasn't being as aggressive at the plate. His first pitch swing went from 36 to 24. His swing percentage went from 52 to 42. Like he was being much more cautious at the plate. And some of these younger players, and you see it with the Latin players, they love to be more aggressive. They love to, especially a guy like Gleyber. You got a pitch on the outside of the plate. You can poke it over the fence in right field in Yankee Stadium. You want these guys, I think, to be a little more aggressive at the plate. Maybe not go swinging at stuff, but not Vlad Guerrero Sr., where it's bouncing in the batter's box and hitting it. But, if it's close, go for it. Where it looks like we're as close this past year, he kind of took pitches more. He was being way more cautious. And I think that's something they're going to work on in the offseason, maybe find a happy medium there. Like, hey, go ahead and walk like 11% of the time, but could you swing the bat a little more if it's, an inch off the plate and try to poke it down the line or something? See what happens, because there's so much power, so much like speed in that bat. Take advantage of it, because we need you to drive in runs, not walk, and let Brett Gardner do it or something. So I'm curious to what they do with Gleyber. The price tag is much better this year, but there was a lot of question marks there. The postseason was nice, I'll give you that, but I'm still not 100% in on him at this point in time. The guy I do like is Kevin Biggio. I know his average is only 250, and that wasn't great. His X-BAT average is 215, so that's really kind of concerning to see what he got there. But his hard hit rate dropped a ton. But he still walks like crazy, and that's something that we like about him, and we kind of don't like, because he's the opposite of Gleyber Torres. He's almost too cautious at the plate. His first pitch swing percentage is 17.4%. I was saying Gleyber was having a bad first pitch swing, and his first pitch swing was 25%. Like, literally, Gavin Biggio, it's less than a fifth of the time. 1 in every 5 at bats, he might swing at the first pitch. That's pretty. If you're a pitcher, just groove a fastball, basically, is what it sounds like. Get that 0-1 count. But other than that, he's very disciplined. Chase rate's low. Zone rate's great. Everything you want to see with the kid's good. Fly ball rate's not bad. Ground ball rate rose from 25 to 40%. So that's something to keep an eye on, because the power was still there. I like him out of these three because he steals bags. That's basically the big kicker for me. Is he's got a little bit of pop. His average isn't horrible. I think it'll keep getting better. His OBP is good, but he's got that pop. And they're hitting him towards the top of that Blue Jays lineup, which is very talented. So I have Kevin Biggio 1. I have Gleyber Torres 2. And Keston here, as much as I want to love this kid, you mentioned the fastball problem. That's devastating to learn, because you look at everything else he's done, his numbers are overall similar, except his hard hit rate dropped a ton this past year. He still strikes out way too much. A lot of question marks here from a kid that in college was a great pure hitter. That's what he was. And he came through the minors, a great pure hitter. Gets to the bigs, there's been some issues. So I need to see changes with him for sure. He'll be a guy that someone will gamble on one of these days, and it will pay off big. Maybe it's 2021. I won't be there for that. So Biggio, Torres, Keston Hiura for me.
Yeah, I mean, Keston Hiura, it's kind of nuts how bad he is against fastballs. His contact rate against fastballs was 55.2% on fastballs last year. His swinging strike rate against fastballs, forcing fastballs, was 20.7%. So, I mean, that's like atrocious. His in-zone contact rate on forcing fastballs was 58.7%. That's like if you hit 50. If you have a contact rate of 55%, you're the worst in the league, probably by about 10%. So that's how bad he is against fastballs. I mean, that's huge. That's a massive, massive issue for sure. And I mean, the thing that I'll say about Gleyber, I was doing a little bit more digging while you were talking, is some of the hard hit and stuff like that was down. But I think if you look at just the ebb and flow of his profile, it wasn't necessarily uncharacteristic. Like, he ended his last 50 balls in play during the season. His average exit velocity was 91 miles per hour. So that had returned. The launch angle did not necessarily improve, but I think the key for him is whereas with Hosmer, you're looking at a guy who's when he reverts back to where he had been, he's at 46% to 55%. Gleyber, even over his last 15 games, was at around 40%. So it's not great, but it's not awful. And he's been in a place where he has had that lower ground ball rate. So I feel like whereas from an analysis standpoint, Hosmer is fighting against this career where we've seen these super high ground ball rates. From Gleyber, we've actually seen the opposite, where we've seen these low ground ball rates, and he's gone the opposite direction. But I think when we regress those, it's probably looks pretty similar to where he was last year, because his ground ball rate increased as well in 2019 up to 39%. So again, definitely not the best season, but I think that there is reason to be optimistic. And if you liked him a lot heading into this year, I don't know why you would. I don't think you should move away from him and not be willing to draft him where he's going right now. Especially, well, I guess he's only going to be shortstop eligible, isn't he? Next year?
He's going to lose some eligibility. That's for sure.
That's not.
Yeah, deep shortstop position changes that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm not drafting him. It's true.
Yeah, so that changes things a bit. But yeah, it's interesting with Gleyber. It's one I want to keep an eye on, because I do remember he hit much better in the second half of his season, because he got hurt, came back, a lot better after that. So, yeah, we'll have to see how it all plays out there with Glaber and company. But the other second base situation we have here is two little guys, not known for a ton of power, but pure hitters. One had a decent year. One had a horrible year, but an amazing postseason that might get people a little more jacked up on him going into 2021. But I picked 109, Jeff McNeil. I picked 113, Jose Altuve. Altuve was like a late first, early second for the most part at times last year, maybe dug into the third, depending on what league you drafted in. And McNeil kept moving up the draft boards. Now you're getting him after pick 100. This is an intriguing two guys to me. I want to see where you stand on this.
Yeah, I think, with McNeil, who was a guy I loved coming into this season, I should actually look up. Do you know what his eligibility for next year is going to be? Because I actually think that's pretty big for him. I'll look at it. I'll look at it here really quickly. Always makes for entertaining podcasting. So in 2020, he had 12 games at second, 9 at third, and then 28 in the outfield. Well, 32 in the outfield. So exactly. He should, unless they make it 10 games, he wouldn't have third base. But I think that's really valuable. I really like McNeil a lot. I mean, he wasn't really different this year versus last year, except for the power. And I do believe in the power a little bit. Not like he's going to be like a big power guy, but I just think that I like the type of bat to ball skills that he has. I think those are the types of guys that can fairly consistently, or at least I trust them. And again, somebody should do research on this who's smarter than me. But when they have those really good bat to ball skills, I feel more confident in those kind of pulled short porch home runs, being a little bit more in control of the batter. And so I do think, he's probably a 20 home run guy over the course of a full season. I should check out some expected home run metrics or something like that on him. But so I really like him. I think he's going later. For me, he's kind of like an 80 to 90 ADP type guy. So I'll probably have a lot of him if he stays there. Altuve, I do like more than McNeil. It'll be interesting to see what the Astros look like next year, because I think, Springer's probably going to be gone, right? They're probably not going to re-sign him. So, who takes over the number one spot? Is it Altuve who goes in that one spot for him? Do they try to get creative and get Bregman up there just because he's got the great OBP, the great eye, get him a bunch of plate appearances? I don't know, but I think it's going to be a weaker lineup than it has been in the past. And so that's a little bit of a dent against him, but I still think he's a very good baseball player. The speed, maybe a little bit, I think him and McNeil will probably steal a similar number of bases next year. I'd give Altuve the power, a little bit of the power nod. I think I'd give McNeil a little bit of the batting average nod. And I think, my one concern with McNeil is the Mets just moved him all over the place, right? And he was hitting 7th, he was hitting 8th, which is not where a guy from my perspective like him should be. But so I think I lean Altuve a little bit. I think Altuve is a great value where he's going right now, at least in the 2 early mocks at 112 or something like that. I think McNeil's a good value going there. And both of them are second basemen I can definitely see myself having a lot of next year if the price holds.
Yeah, this one's Altuve for me pretty big time because the power speed combo, and I am 100% on board with him. Bouncing back, maybe not to 330 hitting Altuve, but 280 to 300. I'm 100% on board with that. It'll be interesting to see what their team does, but they always have minor leaguers. They'll spend money somewhere else. They'll be competitive still, but I think Altuve will be finally saw the postseason. Altuve, I think, is closer to what we'll get next year than the bad regular season Altuve. I think there's a lot going on between those years of some of those Astros that once they kind of got situated in the postseason, we saw more of what we expected from them. Love them or hate them. That's what turned out to. So I'm on board with Altuve. It was just one of those years where things just dropped off dramatically. But even his X-Stats said he underperformed. He should have had better numbers. So as bad as they were, they shouldn't have been as bad, if that makes you feel any better. Barrel rate was down. Everything was pretty much down for Altuve. McNeil is very interesting to me. The multi-position eligibility is tremendous. 100% with you there. His hard hit rate dropped, though, from 36 to 26 this past year. That's a little concerning for me. The strikeout rate's still great. Walk rate went up a little bit. But the barrel rate went from 4.8 to 2.5, similar to what he had in 2018. I remember writing about him last preseason, the year, talking about 2019, where the power showed up. But it was one of those, he hit for a ton of average, got hurt, came back from injury, stopped hitting for average, hit for power. So it's kind of like he sold out for one or the other, it felt like. This year we didn't see much power, saw a good average. I'm curious on what we get, because right now, say you just prorate his numbers out, he hits like 11 home runs, 12 home runs, but still hits 300 or something. But, some guys are drafting him thinking he's hit 20-something. There's the question mark. Can he hit 20 with 300? That's what I want to see. I haven't seen that yet with him. So it's interesting with McNeil. I go Altuve over McNeil. I think Altuve at this point, he's still a darn good second baseman. Like, I take him over Ketel Marte. Or not Ketel, no, Keston Hiura. Ketel Marte, I think he's going too low. But Keston Hiura. And then it gets interesting. You got Brandon Lau getting moved up all the way to the fourth second baseman off the board. I like Brandon Lau. Don't get me wrong. That's a heck of a bump on this. Yeah, that's that's one of those. Like, I like him a lot, but I think pick 100. Like, McNeil on them, I think would be too early for Lau. I don't know. Like, that's a tough one to evaluate, but definitely not fourth. Definitely not there. So maybe with the Jake Cronenworths of the world, I think go that direction. But Altuve over McNeil for me.
Yeah, and one thing just to show you just how easily changed the stats from this season are, if you combine Altuve's regular season plus his postseason.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that's 61 games in total that he's played, 270 plate appearances. His batting average would have increased from 219 to 250.
Yeah.
Right? And so it just gives you a sense of like how quickly things can change when a guy gets hot. So again, I think I may be underselling Altuve a little bit there. Did he? What was his? He had 2 stolen bases.
Yeah, he had 2, but he was banged up. Like, he's one of those. I could see him still getting you 8 to 10, getting you 20 plus homers, hitting you 2-way. Like, he's gonna be in a decent lineup. He's going too late for me.
Yeah, well, and when you say it like that too, I mean, the thing is, right, he seems like, he has 10 home runs in, less than 300 plate appearances. So we know he's like a 25 guy, right? So let's say he's a 25-8 or something like that, going where he's going. That's amazing, especially with knowing the batting average, knowing, as long as he stays healthy, which has been an issue, he's going to get those plate appearances. Totally there with you. I think I'm probably, in my analysis, I was underselling him a little bit.
And the last thing I'll say on this is what else could have been hampering him besides maybe injury or mental stuff because of the cheating scandal and all that. Bregman wasn't hitting behind him, so he had no support behind him like usual. Usually Bregman's hitting 330-something, so they have to pitch to Altuve because they take their chances there instead of with Bregman. When the rest of your lineup's not hitting, it's real tough to get anything going. So it'll be interesting to see because I think they all kind of gained a little bit of confidence through this postseason. I doubt it's behind everybody, but I think it won't be as bad as it could have been if they would have started the season with fans and everything. So.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's like, it's got to be mentally
that's
reassuring. Yeah, exactly like you just said. Like you kind of prove you can do it on the biggest stage. And so all these ideas about the only reason why you used to be good. Yeah. Anyways, I'm just re-saying what you were saying. But.
No, it's all good. Let's go to the shortstop one. And this one's great because we love Tim Anderson. We talk about him a lot on this show. But then there's Corey Seager, who's always just been a bugaboo, but had an awesome season. Just won the NLCS MVP because he's got like 5 or 6 postseason home runs. He's hitting everything hard this year. When healthy, he's always been good, but when healthy has been a humongous question year after year. He even got hurt a little bit this year, but not much. Came back, kept playing great, had an awesome year. Then you got Mr. BABIP himself, Tim Anderson, who has got power, speed, everything you want. Seager's going to pick 44, Tim Anderson 48, loaded shortstop position. But these two guys, if you can wait until like round 4 or late round 3 or late round 4, maybe even getting around 5, if they fall, could be tremendous. What's your thoughts on these two?
Yeah, I see that we're back at Corey Seager, 3rd rounder. I think we were here a couple years back as well. I mean, for me, this one's not even close. I mean, who's likely to have the higher batting average? Tim Anderson, right? Who's likely to have the more stolen bases? Tim Anderson by 20, right? Who's likely to score more runs? Tim Anderson, because where he's going to bat in that lineup. Who's likely to hit more home runs? Maybe Corey Seager, right? Corey Seager will get you your RBI, which are just, whatever. So I think this one is Tim Anderson in an absolute landslide for me. And you're not even talking about the health. And I mean, obviously Tim Anderson has had a couple health issues here and there as well. So we can't necessarily negate that. But I just think this is Tim Anderson in a runaway for me. And there's no way Corey Seager should be in the anywhere close to where Tim Anderson's going from my perspective.
Well, I'm so glad you answered it that way because I don't have a whole lot more to add. I just wanted to put it out there because I figured this would be where we're going, and I kind of wanted to get the ball running on this because I know Corey Seager's had a great year. I'm not going to knock that, but I got to see it again. Like if you look at his stats, his barrel rate last couple years 7.3, 8.2, 8.5, 8.3, up to 15.8. Like okay, that's a nice jump, but all of his numbers just skyrocketed. Hard hit rate last year at 38% went up to 56 this year. Like these are great things, but these are definitely things you got to show me again to take you at this point in time. You got to stay healthy for 162. You got to show me you can hit like this the whole season. He's been awesome. We've seen it from Tim Anderson. We know what Tim Anderson can do. We've mentioned that White Sox lineup. Dodgers lineup's no joke, but I'm with you 100%. You and I like to get guys with steals upside with the power and the average. Tim Anderson does it all. He was disrespected last draft season. In theory, he's still kind of getting disrespected to me as the 11th shortstop off the board. It's a deep position, so I get it. Like you can make arguments for all the guys going in front of him, but they all can't do what he can do also. So I think he's a steal. I'm with you 100% on this one. Yeah. All right. We'll head to third base now, and this is another one. We mentioned Altuve earlier. Now we're going to talk Alex Bregman. A lot of these Astros are going to be dropping a bit, and it's going to make things very interesting. Bregman was a late first, early second last year. Now he's a pick 34, almost. He's like about middle of round 3. And then you got Rafael Devers, another guy that was going early last year. He's going in the back end of round 3 at about pick 38. So if you got Bregman or Devers, who are you going with?
Oh, man. This is a little bit of a tough one, I think. Because, Bregman, I'd lean Bregman just because everything is so solid in what he does. Like, he's just so good in terms of plate discipline, contact rate. He obviously doesn't have the quality of contact metrics that we'd love to see, but he's one of these guys who can pull the ball down the line on a consistent basis. And it's not just the Crawford boxes. In previous years, he's hit more home runs away from Houston as compared to in Houston. And part of that is just because it's a pretty strong pitcher's park. And so, yeah, I would probably lean toward Bregman, I want to say, just because of the consistency, and the Astros, I think, are going to be a better team than the Red Sox are. I think the Red Sox are going to be bad next year as well, because I think they're going to try to build. I think they're going to build from the ground up. I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to trade some of their, like Xander Bogaerts, for instance. So I think I'd probably lean towards Bregman, just because the profile I think is more consistent, and I do worry a little bit about Devers and that consistency. Obviously, he was crushing the ball towards the end of the year. He started out really slow, but you don't see, and Bregman struggled this year as well, but you don't necessarily see the same peaks and valleys out of Bregman. Again, I probably won't be going for either one of them because the speed just isn't necessarily there, but it's like, Devers saw 7%, 7% decrease in contact rate overall, right? And last year he saw a 3.5% increase over previous years. So is it that last year was just kind of a little bit of an aberration when it came to his contact rate, and it's really around that 74 to 75%? His plate discipline has not improved at all, which again, in a batting average league isn't necessarily the most important thing, but I think there's enough in there that will make me maybe a little bit more hesitant around Devers than maybe a Bregman.
Yeah, this one's really tough for me because I like Devers a lot. I love his power. He even usually gives you a little bit of speed. Didn't give you any speed this last year. His average is usually money. Everything was down for him, obviously. That's why these two guys are both dropping in drafts. But you look at it, like his barrel rate was higher than it's ever been, but his hard hit rate dropped. The concerning thing was the strikeout rate. It was 24-7. Last year at 17, then back to 27 this past year. Like you mentioned, the contact rate. Those are very interesting to look at. The zone contact dropped 7%. The chase contact dropped 8%, and his whip percentage rose almost 8%. So he was, his chase rates and his swinging rate, zone rates were pretty similar. Just when he swung the bat, he wasn't making contact. It was very, very weird to see with a guy like Rafael Devers, to see what all was going on in that situation. He was also not going oppo as much as he was before. He's going more center to right field, so maybe a different approach at the plate. That might be something, or maybe the pitch mix changed on him quite a bit, something worth digging into more. But it's very weird to see what took place when he's still hitting the ball hard. He's barreling it up more, but he's not making nearly as much contact, which obviously will result in the numbers we're seeing. So he's a guy I still want to keep an eye on, though, because he's only 23 years old. Like, this kid's so talented. And I like Bregman, too. Like, it's a good conversation to have. I think Bregman's a more sturdy guy, like you said. Consistent average, maybe a little more power. Devers' power is awesome, but maybe a little more power with Bregman. I think I lean Devers here, but they're both like really, really close. Bregman, you can basically say everything I thought about Altuve, I could think about Bregman, like bouncing back next year for all these reasons. But I think I'm going to go Devers over Bregman, but it's very, very close. All right, this one I did just for you, Toby, because I know how much you like this guy, but it involves a guy we don't draft and a guy that's moving up draft boards as playing his rookie season and tore the cover off the baseball. You got Chris Bryant at pick 119, and you got Alec Baum at pick 123. You probably won't pick either one of them, but if you had to, which one would you go with?
Well, I said all that negative stuff about Alec Baum and how high he was going, and then diving in a little bit deeper, I didn't realize how good some of his StatCast metrics were. They were actually really good. So I'm not going to go. I still think that's way too high for Alec Baum, but I do want to take back a little bit of the harsh words that I said about his quality of contact skills, because they didn't show up as much in like Fangraphs as they did, in terms of StatCast. And when it comes to quality of contact, I definitely trust StatCast a little bit more in terms of just like hard hit rate versus barrel rate and all that jazz. So with that said, I might actually lean Bohm in that instance. It's so hard with Chris Bryant because what are you getting now? It's just, it's hard. It's literally, it's hard because this year he's not as bad as he was this year, right? But it's been such a long time since he was the elite type of guy. It's like I'd almost rather take a little bit of that upside, over Bryant, which sounds ridiculous, and maybe it is. Maybe my bias against Bryant is just so big, but I have a hard time seeing great stuff there.
It's tough. Like the Triple Play Fantasy guys say Mr. Freeze at the StatCast page is blue, and Chris Bryant is all blue except the sprint speed. Like it's bad, and it's gotten worse like the last few seasons. It's not like it's a one-time thing. You've been on top of it for a while, and it just dropped off tremendously this year. So, like you said, is he going to be this bad next year? Probably not. But he's still worth going here, where you can get the upside of a guy like Alec Baum, who literally was torching the baseball. This is why we talked about in DFS. Like, his price tag was always so low, hitting in the middle of that Phillies order. It's like, you just keep playing this kid. He's hitting the snot out of it, and it was paying off left and right. Little bit of speed, got some power. The average, he was doing all that in the minors. Will he hit 338? No. His XBA was 286. I could see 280. And that's still pretty darn awesome for a guy that's got legit 20 to 25 plus home runs, maybe swipes you 8, 9, 10 bases. Like, this is a good profile for a third baseman you can get later after the big guys are gone, where you're not going to get a ton of power and average. You'll get you can wait and get a guy like this later on at third base. In that Phillies order, I say it a lot. I know you agree that Phillies lineup's potent. You got McCutchen. If Reese gets it going, you got Harper, Didi. No, he was a 1-year deal, I think. So Didi will be gone.
JTR may be
gone, but you got Segura's going to be like. There's still a lot of weapons in that lineup. So
I think JTR probably resign.
I hope he does, because if he's a Yankee, God help us all. But yes, I hope he resigns. I really do. Bryce Harper he's trying hard enough. He might want to give up some money or defer some cash to make it work. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I think I'm going to go Alec Baum over Chris Bryant too. I think I'm just Chris Bryant's on that list of not going to get drafted by me anytime soon. So that's where we stand on that.
It's just, it's just been a few seasons, and obviously, like, his previous seasons weren't that bad. I mean, he did have 108 runs and 31 home runs in 2019. So, maybe, but I don't know. There's just not. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't help that we've already been soured on him to begin with, so that's just where things stand. But
it was interesting to me how he and Javi Baez were treated so differently in the lineups. Towards the end of the season, Bryant always stayed up towards the top, and Javi was like dropped down to pick number 6, number 7, things like that. It was kind of weird how the Cubs handled that whole situation, because Bryant had no business being anywhere close to the top of that lineup last year.
Yep.
So, anyways,
they just saw OBP, and he didn't even have that last year. So, yeah, it was pretty bad. But the other third baseman, what I want to talk about is two guys that one, Brian Anderson, was a very popular late round pick last year, and he had a good season, not a great season, but had a good season, and we know what he brings to the table. The other guy, and he's going to pick 166. At 163 is Gio Urshela of the New York Yankees, and this guy gets no respect at all. He is a really good pure hitter. Hits usually about 6th in that Yankees order, so a lot of guys to drive in from each night. I think this guy's sneaky good. I think he could be an interesting value. What is your take on these two?
Yeah, I kind of had a chance for both of them in our 2 early mock drafts, and I went with Urshela. I think Urshela, like, from the skills perspective, he's just super solid. I mean, the O swing's not great, but he makes a ton of contact on everything. The StatCast metrics and the quality of contact is pretty strong as well. He was injured obviously this year for a little bit, but he plays great third base. I mean, he's their third baseman of the future for all intents and purposes. He will bat later on in the lineup, which is a little bit of a bummer. But I would lean him in this particular instance just because I think he's the type of guy who just has shown the last couple of years he's incredibly solid, and he's going to contribute everywhere except for maybe stolen bases a little bit. I mean, Anderson had a phenomenal season this year for where he was going in drafts. I mean, 11 home runs, 38 RBI. I think he outperformed a little bit of maybe what he should have, gotten. Like the barrel rate went up slightly, but the average exit velocity was down. His expected BA was 228. If you look at some of the other metrics, like a big drop in his contact rate, it was the home run per fly ball rate that really carried him a lot. I still love Brian Anderson, and I could see myself getting, both of those guys. Does he have outfield eligibility this year? Yeah, I know. No, Anderson's just going to be strictly third base.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. That changes.
Yeah, no 2020 outfield innings, which makes me sad.
Weird.
Yeah,
it's really weird. Huh.
Yeah, so I like Anderson a lot. I think he's a guy who could just bust out. He kind of did a little bit this year, but I think actually with a little bit more support in terms of the skills, batting in the middle of that Marlins lineup, which should be improved again, next year, but. I lean at Urshela just because I think the skills are really, really strong all around. And if he doesn't get injured, he's going to be contributing home runs. He'll be contributing batting average. He'll be contributing runs and RBI. And I'm not as confident that Brian Anderson at this point in his career will be contributing the batting average in the same way that Gio will. So.
Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page there. I'm a big Gio fan. I love what I've seen from him the last couple seasons, and he's been the regular third baseman there, and his numbers back it up. Like, everything's great. The barrel rate were basically similar this past year. The hard hit rates were similar. He actually struck out 4% less, which was even better. He walked 5% more. Like, so that is phenomenal for a guy that has like you said, his contact rate's a little goofy, chases a bit, but he's still walking more and striking out less. That's like what Gleyber Torres was not doing. That's what Rafael Devers was not doing. It was just like, he's doing everything we want. He's doing what I want Gleyber to do. If Gleyber could do this, he'd be hitting like 40 home runs, and we'd all be taking him back in the second round. I'd be on board with that. But he's not doing it, and Gio's doing it, and he's awesome at it. Like, he's really good. He surprises you with his power from time to time. He's good. He's got legit power. Just, you don't expect it. You expect a guy to go, 2 for 5, 3 for 4 once in a while. A couple doubles. Like, He reminds me a lot of Manny Machado before Machado had all his power, where he's a doubles machine and hit for average and drove in runs. That's Gio, and he's just quiet because he's on the Yankees, so he gets buried in that lineup. If he was on the Royals or somewhere in the Midwest, everyone would know who Gio Urshela is, but they don't because he's on the Yankees hitting 6th or 7th. You just don't know him. So I think he's a great player. You hit on a lot of the big spots there. Anderson, I liked him at a more of a discount, and not having the outfield part really stings as well. But still a very good player. Nothing to knock him, but it's Gio and Gio pretty easily for me on this one. All right, let's head to the outfield, and we could have done a ton in the outfield, but I expect a couple that were close, maybe young versus old, like this one, and some other ones that kind of make it interesting. But let's start with a young versus old here, and it's guys we like. Tommy Pham picked 102 and 102.2, and Kyle Lewis at 102.7. So essentially going about the same pick. You got Tommy Pham, who used to be a guaranteed 2020, like 270 to 280, just machine, rock. Now you got Kyle Lewis, not a big average guy, power, some speed, had a monster, probably rookie of the year season. Where would you go with these two?
Yeah, I go with Pham, I think, still. I mean, the injuries, concern me a good deal, but I think that Pham has the OBP. He's in that Padres lineup. He steals bases and more consistently than I think Lewis does. And so it's just more of a stable profile. I kind of know more of what I'm getting. And even if Pham is injured, I mean, this is a good example. Like this year, Pham was injured for most of the season, but if you had him, I mean, yeah, you're a little bit sad, but he got you 6 stolen bases. I think it was either 6 or 8 stolen bases in the first 2 weeks of the season, and you can get the other stuff other places. I would lean Pham in this particular instance. And if Pham falls to this point in drafts next year, I think, I'll probably own a decent amount of him because I just think that the profile is so solid for him, like a 2015, 2020 profile that, again, even if he is injured for part of the season, I think I can compensate a little bit for that with what he does. And the injury that he had this year was a little bit of a freak injury, right? It was a hamate bone. So and he's going to have the whole offseason to recover. Obviously, he had that issue, I think, with his elbow, I want to say, as well. So, I mean, there's different things going on there, but I'd still probably be in on Pham over Lewis at this point.
And then he just got stabbed outside a strip club, so hopefully
he did.
They said that recovery is going to go. What I'm more curious of, and I'm glad he's healthy, but Toby, we live in California. How the hell is a strip club open in San Diego?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
From the stories that I read, I'm not sure if he was at the strip club or just outside of the strip club.
Gotcha.
His car was parked there.
And the altercation happened at his car.
And and people were like, I don't know, leaning on his car or something like that. He's probably got a nice car. And words were exchanged and somebody stabbed him.
Yeah, but he's going to survive. Everything was good there, so we're happy. Like I said, I'm more concerned, sadly, about the elbow than the stabbing in his side where stitches should heal all that up because nothing else got internally hurt, so that's good. But, I take Tommy Pham in a heartbeat. We know how much – listeners of the show know how much we liked Pham last year, where he was going. This year's a steal because a 2020 guy at this point in the draft is tremendous for your roster. He's going to be leading off or hitting towards the top of that Padres lineup with Tatis and Machado and Hosmer, as much as you love him or hate him, and Austin Nola. Like they're going to have a very potent lineup again next year. So give me Tommy Pham. I like Kyle Lewis. Don't get me wrong, but there's just things that concern me. Like he hit 262 this year, which is great. X-batting, which is 240 for him. It's still probably not bad. He was a better batting average asset in the minors, a little bit better than that. Barrel rate was good, but like the hard hit rate was only 35%. You thought it would have been a lot harder when it seemed like every time he looked up, he was going deep, but he wasn't. His strikeout rate was still 29%, which, for him is not bad, but it's still not great. 14% walk rate was very nice to see, though. So there's a lot of good and a lot of bad with him, and he's still super young, so there's time to develop maybe and change things a little bit there. I just want Tommy Pham at that point. Like Kyle Lewis to me was really good. Should be going a little later in drafts. The question I have for you is, I know we like Tommy Pham at 102. Your boy Eddie Rosario is going to pick 98. How do you decipher between those two?
I pick Eddie Rosario probably. I think I did that in the too early mock. I mean, it depends on team construction pieces as well. But I just think Eddie Rosario is like super underappreciated. He does the same thing every year. It's that batting average power combo, which I think is really great. And he actually stole a little bit this year. So he does add a few bags. It will be interesting to see what happens to him though, because I don't know if he's going to be with the Twins next year. I don't know if they're going to want to pay what he's going to make in his last year of arbitration before free agency. So, we'll see what happens there. But I would lean Eddie in that particular spot probably.
All right, we got another outfield one to do here, kind of another power speed one that is interesting because Byron Buxton this year hit 13 homers and only stole 2 bags. And when he was healthy, which is always the caveat with him, he was amazing. Like they even moved him up towards the top of the order. Like it was big boy stuff with Byron Buxton going to pick 128 in these drafts and going to pick 132, a guy we liked going into last year. We compared him to Tommy Pham last year. Some injuries derailed things, got in a brawl because someone talked about his mama. It got wild at times with Ramon Laureano. He's going to pick 132. So in theory, could be a discount if we think he is Tommy Pham. You get him 30 picks later, or do you go for Byron Buxton at pick 128?
Yeah, I would go with Laureano in that particular case. He started off really slow this season, but he started to turn it on towards the end of the year. We saw last year, where he also struggled, I think, at the beginning of the season, but then he went on an absolute tear for a couple months there. And that's what pushed his ADP up so much. I think you have the power speed. I think you have batting average. I think you have, OBP. He's got decent plate discipline. So I think you have a 5-category contributor generally. I mean, the batting average isn't probably going to be super elite, but it'll be solid. So I definitely go with Laureano. I mean, I think the issue continues to be with Buxton, both the injuries, but then also just the inconsistency in the batting profile. I mean, Buxton's O swing was over 50% this year. Contact rate was pretty low. I moved off of his page, but I'm imagining that home run to fly ball rate was, through the roof, probably. Let's see, like 30% plus would be my guess. Let's see, 26.5%. His career is 13.1%, including 10.1% last year. So, and his ground ball rate went up as well. So, I just, I would go with Laureano there. I'm probably not going to pay up for Buxton, especially, I think the speed will be there in some capacity, but it wasn't last year, and it's not a sure thing, right?
No, that's the thing. If Buxton's not running, I don't want Buxton. That's what you're drafting him for. Is you're already playing with fire for the injury risk, and if he's not stealing, it's like I can get Randall Grichuk 100 picks later and get 30 home runs. Like I don't need to go take you right now. So that's kind of like, and there's more guys like that's just the one that pops into my head right now. So I go Laureano as well. I think there's a lot to like about him. I mentioned the injuries. He's another guy. I feel like a broken record, but like when you're talking, I start looking at their pages more, and he's another guy where it's just all of a sudden his swing rate dropped 8% this past year. So then it correlated across. He was chasing the ball 6% less of the time. His zone swing was almost 10% less, and his walk rate doubled this past year. So he's walking more, which is great. So his OBP is doing great. He can get on maybe steal some bags, but he's not hitting for a big average because when he does hit it, it's not been productive. His BABIP's down a bit. He's not hitting for home runs, which we kind of wanted the 2020 upside with him. So it's kind of another interesting one. Does he stick with this kind of more disciplined approach? Let's get on base, let's steal bags and score some runs. Or do I go back to, I can hit 20-plus home runs and get the job done? What do we see from him next year? And I think we'll see a little more power from him because that's one thing the A's this year, especially towards the end, and it kind of was their detriment in the postseason, is their offense lacked a lot of consistent thump. They really, really did. It seemed like they were almost all too disciplined. And sometimes it cost them strikeouts because they fall behind in the count and other things like that. So I think Laureano's a strong bounce-back candidate, and I might have to just make a list of guys that change their – I don't know if they change their approach, but just looking at things makes you think they changed their approach at the plate and see if we can maybe get something tweaked on that one. But, yeah, I'll take Laureano over Buxton as well. All right, the last one we have here, we have a catcher's debate on this one, and it's an early round catcher's one, which is it's a good one. Well, not early. It's early for catchers. It's the fourth and fifth catcher. But I pick 138.6, Yasmani Grandal. At 140, Wilson Contreras. It's a good one, Toby. So what do you have on this one?
Yeah, this is kind of a tough one, and I added this to the list just because, number one, I love catchers. And then number two, I just think I think this is one that I'll be struggling with a little bit if it gets to the point of me getting a catcher at this particular point in time. Grandal, obviously OBP stud, great, but the batting average is always lacking. You're looking at 240, 230. Contreras, and I think it's also like where Contreras got so many plate appearances this year. And it's like, did he get so many plate appearances this year because he played first, he played DH, because of the shortened season, and they just wanted to kind of maximize him because he's one of the better bats in this lineup? Or, so was it because of the shortened season, or is this the type of plate appearances that we see from Contreras moving forward? Because it's similar to what we saw from Grandal in Milwaukee, where he would play first. He wouldn't DH, but he'd play first a lot, and they'd get his bat in the lineup. Whereas now with the White Sox being as loaded as they are, and even more loaded when you think about some of the prospects that they can bring up, I think I kind of lean towards Contreras in this instance, because I think he's more likely to have a higher batting average, even though he struggled with some contact this year. I think overall his overall skill set is higher contact, higher batting average than Grandal. I think there's fairly similar power potential from the two. And I do think that Contreras, because he's one of the better bats in that Cubs lineup, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a significant plate appearance edge heading into 2021. But I think a lot of that will depend on what happens in the offseason. How do the Cubs plug their holes if they do plug those holes? What type of trades do they make? Because they got a lot of guys who are entering some of the final years of their contracts. That core is kind of, maybe a little bit past its prime now. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. But both guys that I really like and I think are pretty solid, but very different profiles and consistency levels. So it'll be interesting to see where they kind of end up.
Yeah, it's a very good comparison between the two, because like you mentioned, you got Grandal switch hitting, middle of a White Sox order. That's going to be good for sure next year. A lot of things to like there, but he brings a big batting average to the plate the last couple of years, it feels like. So there's a little bit of a concern there, where Contreras, on the other hand, when he's swinging it well, has a really good average, 243 last year. Not great, but for a catcher, it's actually not horrible. DH, first base catcher, like you said, helps a ton with Caratini there, especially. It's an interesting dynamic between the two, that's for sure. Very consistent approach to the plate, though, with Contreras. I'd probably lean Contreras over the two, but I don't think you can go wrong either way. And if it's an OBP league, I know Contreras had a 356 OBP last year and a career 351, which is really, really good. I think I'd still take Grandal on the OBP department. I guess the team context would be the tiebreaker there. But give me Contreras an overall regular 5x5. All right, got a couple listener questions before we wrap this up here. And the first one from Dave Petroziello says, you guys touched on him a bit in the last pod, but what the heck happened to Josh Bell? Was the first 4 months of 2019 just a huge fluke? He was so bad in 2020. We kind of hit on it. Did you want to kind of rehash anything there?
No, I mean, I think we covered him pretty extensively. Again, it's one of these things where we're like, it's like, what is the small sample size? And it looks like the small sample size is the thing that doesn't necessarily fit the profile. Like, yes, this season is the worst that he's been, but also like he was worse towards the second half of last year, and he wasn't as good, in years before that. So, there's just everything went wrong, as we covered before. And I just don't think I'm going to be in. It'll be interesting to see what happens to him, though, because he's the type of guy where I could easily see him, what is it called? Non-tendered by the Pirates and end up on the Rays or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
All out.
Yeah, exactly. Like a little bit more, getting him on the right team, I think could really change that value significantly. So that'll depend some of it there, but just a lot of way too many red flags for me to, I think pursue him.
100%.
It all went wrong, to answer your question.
It all went wrong, exactly. And then the other question we have is from Joe McHugh at @the_McHugh. As you think about 2021 starting pitchers, How are you thinking about workload increases, league division adjustments given film and prep time, plus more opponents, and more generally how some results might stabilize over a long season? I know we've hit on this on recent weeks, and we'll hit on it plenty going forward. But have you had any time to think about how you would approach 2021 pitchers just yet?
Not that much. I mean, part of it will be the projections and the way that they kind of, tackle it a little bit. I think a lot of it we'll get to know as the season kind of comes up, like spring training and things like that. But I generally think the guys who, I guess maybe the best way to think about it is that you have like this continuum of pitchers. And on one end, you have the high volume guys. And on the other end, you have the low volume guys, right? The guys that we always question, like how many innings are they going to have? How many did it? Then you have like kind of your aces who are throwing 180 to 200 plus innings every single year. I think that continuum should stay relatively similar, right? Like the guys who, even if guys aren't throwing 200 innings next year, the guys who are normally throw more innings are going to be more likely to do that, right? But I think a lot of teams handle this internally, like they had guys throwing. I think there was an article about Dylan Bundy and how the Angels actually had him throw about 180 innings because on his ranch when it was the off season, he was throwing like on a regular schedule to make sure that he was keeping that arm up. So I'm sure that a lot of other teams did something similar, but it may be one of those situations where we find out in the off seasons that a lot of teams did it and some teams didn't. And then maybe you penalize the guys who didn't, are on teams that don't have that type of that didn't have that type of setup more than the guys who don't. So I think we'll have more information as leagues approach. But and again, it's probably going to be one of these situations where the teams that are best at developing pitchers, the teams that are kind of out ahead of it in terms of like just analytics and their understanding of pitching are once again going to be, are going to have even more of an advantage over the teams that just, fell asleep, during that period of time. So I think we'll learn more as the season progresses, but generally speaking, I think that continuum holds where, your high volume ace type guy is going to continue to be that regardless of what the situation looks like. And those guys that struggle for innings, right, are going to have major questions. Like a guy like, a good example is Corbin Burns, right? Like he's not going to throw 180 innings next year, right? But maybe he'll throw 150, something like that. And looking how teams have handled this in the past. Anyways, I'll just keep talking forever. So take it away from me, please.
No, Burns, Luzardo, those are the kind of guys like the younger arms are the ones I'm more concerned with. Like you basically said, the veterans we've seen do it before. I'm cool with it. That's why I still have the argument for Walker Buehler because like he battled a blitzer this year. He always starts out slow. If this went a full season, he still would have got 170 plus innings. He's gone over 180 before. Like maybe he goes 165 to 170 next year, not 200 like I thought he would have done this year. But I still think he gets his. Like the aces are going to get theirs. So that's kind of how I'd approach it. Like the young guns that are the fun new toys, the Tristan McKenzie's, the Sixto Sanchez's, a lot of these guys, maybe be a little careful unless you hear something. So it's like some of them want to go play in the Dominican. Some of their teams want them to go play down there in the winter ball. That could be huge. Like Toby mentioned, guys pitching on the side. I know guys are doing that this season. I know guys that they've said they're going to do it throughout the month of October to basically finish out with another 50 innings or something on their arm. And then they'll take another month or two off and they'll head to Arizona or Florida. Like these guys are going to do everything they can because in the end, the team is responsible for what they do. But at the same time, the player knows that if they're not putting up innings, no matter what the circumstance was, that when they want to go get a new contract, the team will point to this. So they need to be ready to go those innings also. And some of them won't care. First guy that came to mind, an old guy, John Lester, is old. Like he's got 1 or 2 more years left. He might just say, screw it, I'll pitch as much as I can and just take my time off. Or he might just not even care and only want to pitch 120 innings. That's a question mark. But you're not really drafting John Lester. These guys in the middle range.
Don't draft John Lester.
Exactly. But like these guys in the middle, like a Giolito, even Carrasco, I feel pretty confident in. Like there's a bunch of guys that if we've seen them do it before once or twice, I'm cool with them like doing it again this next year. If anything, maybe decrease it by like 15%. And that might just be something to think about throughout the entire landscape of baseball outside of like 5 guys maybe. And then it's really not that big a deal anymore. So there is some concern, and there'll be stuff to listen to, like Toby said, but at the same time, it won't be business as complete usual next year because there will be like consequences for a shortened season. But I think it's going to be pretty darn close to business as usual next year. So as barring the COVID situation, I'm talking about just guys on the field playing baseball. Business as usual. So we'll see how it plays out. But all right, Toby, that'll wrap us up this week. Any final thoughts? It's Dodgers Rays. Who you got?
Oh man, with my heart or my head?
Whichever one's got the right answer.
My heart is with the Rays. My head tells me Dodgers. I think it would have been a really interesting. The Braves Rays would have been really interesting because I just think, similar to the way that the Dodgers and the Braves were interesting. The Braves just don't have the pitching. But the Dodgers, it's tough because they have the pitching and the hitting. The Rays have the pitching, and the hitting just leaves a little bit to be desired. And so that's why I give the edge to the Dodgers in my head. But my heart bleeds whatever color it is that the Rays uniforms are. And so, and you want to know who else is probably going to play in the Dominican League?
Who?
Yasiel Puig.
Oh, dude, good call. Good call.
Yeah, I saw a little note from one of the from a reporter. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I know there's a lot of teams that want their like American players to go down there and play, but they're having issues with the whole COVID thing. So because that could be a big deal too. Maybe these guys get the upper hand. Like there's a ton of storylines that we're gonna have it coming out. But that's why they're having the instructionals are going on right now in Arizona. Like I saw Ryan Bloomfield tweeted out a box score from like the Mariners and someone else where some prospects were hitting bombs. So they're trying to make things work. We'll see what happens. Just kind of watch the Mining the Newses of the world and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I'm pulling for the Rays. I'm always terrified of the Dodgers. As much crap as I talk about the Dodgers, it's all in fun for one, and B, I respect the snot out of the Dodgers. Like I've always said, it's tough being a Giants fan these days because I like guys like Bueller. I like guys like Bill. I love Mookie Betts. Like it's really hard to be a Giants fan and hate the Dodgers because it's like the old school Dodgers. There's a whole different atmosphere. That's why the rivalry existed. These guys are like good young ball players that are just hard to not like. It's just more of a fun, hey, you're the Dodgers, I'm the Giants. Like, here we go. And then when the game's over, we shake hands and walk away. So that's where that's at. The Dodgers are due, if you want to believe in that narrative. But like the Rays is scary because if they didn't play like A++ level defense like they did against the Astros, they probably don't win that series either. So it's like it all fell on the right way there with the pitching and the defense that played out of its mind. Can they do it for another at least 4 games? We'll see. It's going to be really interesting. And the caveat on this playoffs, so we didn't see it in the first few rounds. There's off days after like 2.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, it was. I think it's game 1 and 2 is Tuesday, Wednesday. I think they get Thursday off. I think they play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they get Monday off. I think is how it's going to go. So
wow, Major League Baseball is allowing them to play on the weekends.
Yes,
wow,
right?
What a pleasure.
Yeah, oh, good old MLB. But we'll wrap it up there, and we'll have a World Series champ to talk about next week. So that'll be Game 5, I believe. So we'll see. But you can catch Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm at BDentric. We'll do some pitching player debates and your questions next week. But until then, catch you guys later.